grandfather's garden wasn't just a patch of land. It was a living scrapbook. He planted it in 1965, a year after buying the last undeveloped acre in what would later become the Glenridge Acres neighborhood. Long before the HOA, long before the cookie-cutter houses, this was just wild earth and dreams. Roses bordered the fence line. Tomatoes and snap peas grew in raised beds my grandfather built by hand. There was an oak tree with a swing that had been passed down to me, and now to my daughter. Everyone loved Grandpa Joe's garden, except the HOA. One Friday afternoon, a letter arrived from Glenridge Acres Homeowners Association. Dear resident, please be advised that Lot 91, currently unbuilt and known informally as Joe's Garden, has been reclassified as HOA common property and is scheduled for landscaping redevelopment. Demolition of existing, unauthorized plantings will begin Monday, 8 a.m. They were going to destroy it, without so much as a phone call. Joe left the property to me when he passed. But because the HOA had gradually acquired rights to shared development space in the neighborhood, there had been confusion over where their jurisdiction began and ended. And they were taking advantage of that. I wasn't a lawyer, but I was a city planner. I knew the difference between a HOA claim and a binding property line, and I knew exactly how to fight back. First, I pulled the original land surveys from 1965, along with the deed Joe signed over to me in 2012. Then I compared those to the HOA's supposed updated zoning map. Their map had a glaring error. They had used GIS software that didn't take legacy lot designations into account. In short, they had claimed land that was never theirs. With a notarized copy of the original survey and deed, I filed a formal injunction with the local zoning authority. Demolition would not begin Monday. The HOA president, a slick man named Brent Collier, called a special meeting on Sunday evening. He stood at the head of the rec center room with a laser pointer and an air of authority. This garden is an eyesore. It's inefficient land use. It lowers property values. We intend to build a dog run, benches, maybe a putting green. I raised my hand. Do you have legal claim to the land? Brent paused. We have plans submitted and approved. But do you own it? Silence. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me quietly. We love Joe's garden. My son learned to plant tomatoes there. Why does the HOA think they can just steamroll over people? Let me know if you start a petition. We'll sign. That night, I launched a website, savejoesgarden.org. Within 48 hours, it had 600 signatures from residents, former neighbors, and even local school kids who had taken field trips to Joe's garden. Brent wasn't going to back down quietly. He filed a motion to block the injunction, claiming the garden constituted an attractive nuisance, a legal term for something on your property that could harm children. He also had someone tip off code enforcement. Within a week, I had violations on my door for everything from non-uniform fencing materials to excessive ground cover density. It was war. I didn't retaliate with shouting or social media blasts. I responded with paperwork. I contacted the local land trust. They helped me secure temporary historical landmark status for the garden, citing its continuous cultivation since the mid-1960s and community impact. I also found a loophole. The HOA's own bylaws had never been updated to reflect county changes in green space designation, which meant they couldn't legally touch a thing. At the next HOA meeting, I presented the land trust letter and historical documentation. Brent's face went pale. You went behind the board's back. No, I said. I followed the law. You tried to erase my grandfather's legacy. The board was silent. Then an elderly woman named Marcia spoke up. I vote we withdraw the garden redevelopment plan. A vote was called. It passed. Brent stormed out. I knew the fight wasn't truly over. As long as Brent held power, the garden was at risk. So I did the unthinkable. I offered to buy the entire common area the HOA had claimed ownership over. 3 vacant lots, technically under HOA management, adjacent to Joe's garden. They were barely used and cost the HOA more in upkeep than they were worth. After 2 months of negotiation, my offer was accepted. With legal ownership secured, I worked with the city to officially rezone the combined lots as public parkland. We installed benches, community compost bins, and native pollinator gardens. Local students painted murals. Retirees donated birdhouses. We added an educational walking path explaining the history of the land. Joe's garden became Joe Morrison Community Park. Facing a PR nightmare, Brent resigned from the HOA board. It turned out he had diverted HOA maintenance funds to a private landscaping company he secretly owned. Once discovered, he was sued by the association. The lawsuit made headlines in the local news. HOA president steps down amid corruption scandal. Years later, my daughter now swings from the same oak tree I once did. Children run through the garden paths where I learned about patience, life cycles, and dirty hands. A plaque by the entrance reads, "In memory of Joe Morrison, who taught us to grow with care and fight with love." Last spring, I received a letter from the city council. They were nominating Joe Morrison Community Park for the Regional Civic Preservation Award. The nomination read, "For protecting green space, honoring family legacy, and resisting unjust HOA pressure." If Grandpa Joe were here today, he'd probably be sitting on that old bench, sipping his iced tea and shaking his head. All that trouble for a few tomatoes? Then he'd laugh, because he knew it was never just about tomatoes. It was about dignity, roots, and fighting for what's right. And thanks to him, and a little bit of paperwork, the neighborhood learned what it means to grow something real. Subscribe to DD's Stories for more real HOA revenge stories where justice grows deeper than roots.